Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our 5 lovely guests. They're all INTPs, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So, Naisu, would you like to take it off?
Hi, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. I'm Naisu, or INTPical on Twitter, and I am an INTP, 5-wing-6. And my tri-type, I just found out last week, was 5-1-4. I got into MBTI through college. I had a psychotic break, and somebody told me to take creative writing classes so I don't have to take my majors. And my teacher told me I'm not good at writing people, so I researched psychology and I found MBTI archetypes, and then I got hooked. So it's been 8 years.
Hi, I'm Susanne. I'm INTP as the rest of these people, Enneagram 9-wing-8, tri-type 952. I've been into type for about 3 years now. However, I got tested many years ago for work, but then I tested as an INTJ, but I'm not an INTJ. So yeah.
So many INTPs get INTJ on the test. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so belated INTP.
My name's Audrey. I believe I'm an INTP. I was first introduced to MBTI in high school when I tested as an ENTJ. And at the time I thought I was ENTJ, but actually turns out I was just mirroring my brother who's actually an ENTJ. And definitions didn't fit, things didn't seem to fit. So since then I've been actively engaging with all kinds of communities and peoples, and eventually came to the conclusion that my best fit is an INTP, but who knows, maybe there's something I don't know and that could change my type entirely. As for Enneagram, I initially thought I was 9, but given my tendency to not know myself as well as I think I do from an objective point of view, people have contacted me and told me that they think I'm a 5. So I'm split on that, and so we'll see.
That disclaimer there is super 9.
I feel like it's a common INTP thing too, to be skeptical of like things. It's like, I'm open to changing my opinion because like I'm skeptical of this conclusion. So if you present me information that's different and it's accurate, then I'll just change. But it's like, yeah, and it's like INTPs tend to, like, their NE goes everywhere, so it can be hard to pin down like a certain place that they land with certain things sometimes. So I thought that was a little bit INTP. And so Kim, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. My name's Kim. Pretty sure I'm an INTP as well, hopefully, because I'm here. Tri-type, probably 925, but it's like the same thing you said, like, can't really tell. I first heard about MBTI in high school, like 10 years ago, and I was typed as an INTJ, and I was like, this doesn't sound right, so I kind of just gave up on it. But then recently, I actually was recommended a Frank James video, and I saw it, and I was like, hey, maybe I'll look into this again. So I've only been looking into it for like a month seriously, so I probably don't know as much as everyone else here.
And Heather, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
I'm Heather, and I might as well be an INTP. Hey, why not? I first tested INTJ like a lot of the rest of you, although I did it back in 95. It's been a long time. Part of a college psychologist proctored the test, and it never really fully sat well with me, especially the description and the masterminding and the trajectory of the whole thing. And so I kept retesting, and I still retest a couple times a month. And mostly I get INFP, so just as a disclaimer. But I had a period where I was, there's a lull of, I can't figure this out, so I'm not going to mess with it anymore. And then I came across Jungian functions, and then I came into objective personality, and I really like their system. I got typed by them as a INTP. So, and everything that they explained made sense to me. So I'm just going forward with that.
So INTJ is a common like test type for INTPs when they take a test. So it's nice to meet you all. They're a lovely group of INTPs, and I'll have all their links down below. And so my first question for you guys is, what INTPs do you relate to in fiction or in real life?
I did watch the male INTP panel you did, and I really liked the mention of Chidi from The Good Place. I thought he was a really good example.
Yeah.
The fork and the disposal analogy he uses in his head, the fact that he constantly gets stomach aches from potential social conflicts and incongruencies in his philosophy, the fact that he is, at least on the outside, very nice, but internally very structured. A lot of that really resonates with me.
Yeah, he's a really good example of an INTP.
An INTP that I really see in anime communities is Noriaki Kakyoin from Jojo no Kimyo na Boken. JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, I think in English. And yeah, he's INTP 5, I think. I really relate to him when it comes to being strange only around his friends. And he has very niche interests, especially when that part came out, Noriaki's arc. It was like in the 90s, 1994, 1995, and it was like the dawn of video games. So his interests then, it was like very, very INTP for that age. It's just that the anime is very late. So maybe people don't see it as like a very nerdy thing anymore. But during that time, it was very niche video games, and he hyperfixates on just one thing at one time. So yeah.
I like hearing you pronounce things in Japanese. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, I use it for work.
Like looking it up, all the INTPs are like comedians or robots, which is like two really like opposite ends of the spectrum. One I thought was like really interesting was like Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Just you could really see like the way he just has a system for everything, and his annoyance when people don't follow his systems. Like that fits really well because I have that same problem, I guess. I try not to like force people to follow my systems, but like when you think you're right, it's so hard to just like let other people be wrong.
Yeah, the INTPs, their fixation in personality hacker system, the FIRM model, is righteousness. It's very similar to objective personalities like self. So it's like self-righteousness in the sense that it's like when you think that you're right, it's kind of like you're kind of fixated on that. Just thought I'd share that.
I found out that Larry David is related to Bernie Sanders. And they're very similar. In fact, Larry David played Bernie Sanders a couple of times, and they have very similar personalities. And I recently saw an interview of Bernie where he got really self-conscious about people's naming of his personality. They said he's grumpy, and he was really self-conscious and weird about that in a way that he didn't quite like roll with it. He just, yeah, I'm grumpy anyway. On to this other thing. He's like, well, people think I'm grumpy. Like he wasn't really fully self-aware of the image he had and the image he projected, which I think is really very INTP, to be oblivious to how you come across.
I think I was sitting here, I was trying to figure out if there was any like person that I sort of could admire, and I think I narrowed it down to two people. Elle from Death Note when I was a kid, you know, like when I was a kid, I was like, I know everything, and I know based on all these patterns that are happening, what's gonna happen, and why this is happening, all this. And then I grew up, and I was like, no, I don't know anything. So now I think I sort of admire. I'm not sure if the character is more ENTP or an INTP, but I think Liz Lemon from 30 Rock, and I think the way that she struggles with that, her image of how things should be versus how it actually is, and how she struggles with those human relationships, but also her ability to like deal with chaos. I really sort of see myself in that.
Another kind of famous INTP in the anime community is Sakata Gintoki from Gintama. Do you know him?
Yeah, but I wonder if he's an INTP or an ISTP because like
he SI loops a lot. He SI loops so much. Like whenever he tries to remember about the Shinsengumi times, like when he was Shiroyasha, like he dwells on that too much. But he's in the point in his life where he's like, oh, I'm old, I'll be a little bit apathetic, and leans back into his NE. So like he likes jokes, and he likes to lean into his FE now because he has a found family. You only see him TI ever like when he's in a fight or like when he has to get out of a situation. But yeah, I think he mistypes as an INFP a lot because of that, like very apathetic. But a lot of the people I talk to, sometimes my clients like to talk to me about anime, and recently, maybe like the past year or so, they've been interested in MBTI. So like sometimes when we have lulls in the conversation, I'll humor them like, okay, yeah, I can try to type you. So I really relate to Sakata Gintoki's, especially his humor. It's called in Japan oyaji gyagu, like old man jokes. Yeah, like we like puns. So ダジャレは本当に難しいね. Like I think puns in language is more of like a game than actual humor because there's so much math into it. Like the word should rhyme, it should sound like this. And in Japan, when you make puns, people think that you're like really witty because it's a linguistic thing. it's not very easy to make jokes in Japanese. So yeah, I guess so. I also kinda look up to him, but not so much.
He's hilarious.
So that's all. He is.
Okay, so I guess I haven't said anything. But ahead of this, you mentioned, oh, try to think of some fictional INTPs you relate to. And then I go, I don't usually sit and watch shows and pick characters apart like that because I don't find that to be fun. But then I checked out shows I've been watching lately. Okay, that show, which one is an INTP? Yeah, that's probably an INTP. I don't remember. Next show. Yeah, that's also probably an INTP. But what they had in common was that it was like supporting characters that support the main character because the INTP has a really boring life, and then they do something they thought they never would have done because they're boring, ordinary people. So I don't know. I guess I maybe can relate to that a bit, but I haven't even mentioned names, but it doesn't really matter because it's like side characters.
I always think of Descartes, like classic philosopher. That's like the INTP of INTPs because of the I think, therefore I am. And it's not necessarily that the more I think, the more I exist, or I feel better and assured that I exist because I know I'm thinking. It's more that if I'm looking for proof of something existing, because I'm not sure that anything really exists. And that's the problem with intuitives in general, is that they're never really sure anything really exists. Well, the only thing I can really be sure of is the self-validation of my awareness of thinking. So I think of that, and actually Sartre complained that he didn't have any ground to stand on with self-validation. He goes, you can't prove that something exists by its own self-awareness. That doesn't work. You have to have it in the context of other things, of the greater world. So he sort of poo-pooed Descartes for using his self-referencing, which as an INTP, I was like, but that's the most sure thing, is the self-referencing, is the self-awareness. You can't be sure of anything else. The outer world is not as real as the inner one.
What do you think about Kant?
I don't have a lot of experience with Kant. What are some of his premises?
Utilitarianism, isn't that him?
Mm-hmm.
The greater good. If something leads to the greater good, it's the right thing, sort of.
Yeah. It's very ends justify the means sort of thing.
No, that's Machiavelli.
It's more like respect for people as ethics. It's more ethics over morality. Like if you respect your fellow man, then therefore you have like value in society, and therefore you can exist with others, kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's that respect that matters.
Hmm?
It's the respect for your fellow man
Yes.
that really has the
Yeah.
call.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that as far as existing in society that would matter, but as far as understanding the fundamental truth, your existence with other people isn't really a factor.
You mentioned proving existence. I guess it depends who you're trying to prove it to. If you're trying to prove it to yourself, then like, yeah, I'm conscious. Like,
Yeah,
that's enough. It's enough for me.
right. The thing I'm most sure of is that I'm here and that this is happening because I have most self-awareness of thought, whereas the other stuff is not quite as the tangible world isn't. I don't have a lot of pingbacks for that as much as I do for what's going on inside. So the stuff that's going on between me and other people and how I treat them and how they treat me is sort of there's a lot of negligence there. There's not a lot of attention, so there's a lot less confidence about whether that's real or not.
That's fair. Yeah. I guess I can relate to that. Like somebody told me I live in my head
Yeah.
a lot. And sometimes people get freaked out how I describe my feelings because they always tell me it's like you're not describing yourself. You're not feeling it right now.
Yeah, my feelings are things that happen to me. They aren't connected to my identity, really.
No, yeah. It just happens. And I forgive myself for experiencing them, but they're not really part of me.
They're more like managing children I have than they are who I am.
For me, I guess it's like they're files on my cabinet and they're labeled. And like I'll TISI around them a lot, but like I won't be sorry, I forgot the English word. Natsukashino. Like I won't be very connected to them. So I'm not sentimental about them. Like they are a memory, they are information. They're data that exists within me, but they're not necessarily part of my identity. So yeah.
But I do find them useful information. The older I get.
Definitely.
Oh, can I return to Kant for a second? I found the thing I really liked.
Oh yes, sure.
Like every person should have as much freedom which could be given to everyone else. Like if everyone else can have this freedom, everyone should have it.
Right. If you're doing a thing or acting a certain way, you have to ask yourself if everyone else would do the same thing with society. Is it scalable?
Yeah. No, would it be okay if everyone else did the same thing?
Right.
So it's like has like an extreme fairness to it. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's doable and everyone can have it, it's fine.
Yeah. I think that's it's good in theory, but it's really hard to understand whether it would be practical for me because it's hard for me to imagine society in a large way like that when I'm so.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. Society doesn't operate like that. But if it did, that would be great.
Yeah. Although I think if there was just a million clones of me, I don't know how that society would function.
No, I don't think I would like to live there.
No, it wouldn't be the same person as you. You would just be allowed to do the same things. That doesn't mean that everyone would be the same person.
Yeah, but isn't that how most education systems are run? And look at how crappy the education system is.
Education systems?
You know, massively created and implemented, executed systems, government systems, education systems, all kinds of systems that exist right now is based on the fact, like, if I can do it, so can you. And so in order to deal with that, we're going to set everybody on a grading scale or system, and we can figure out who does this better than somebody else. And look at how well that's working out right now.
So it's sort of a behavioral model where they're assuming everyone has the same starting point psychologically and capability-wise, and then you just all run the same maze?
Yeah,
and if you then that's your problem?
I'm just looking for a realistic example of the description that Susanne provided, where everybody
doesn't exist. So it would be assuming everyone was operating under the same conditions. That doesn't happen in the real world.
Yeah, it's a moral theory.
Yeah.
It's a theory. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, but
it certainly is good for guidance, I think, for self-guidance to say, would I want everyone else to be allowed to do this?
Yes.
And if the answer is no, then you probably should question whether you want to allow yourself to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get behind that. I mean, as a thought study, understanding if other people were to do this, would I have a problem with it? Well, then I should question whether or not I let myself be the exception to that rule.
You run into a problem though when you're like super overcritical of yourself then. Because like I'll let people get away with stuff that I wouldn't do myself, and I'll be like, yeah, it's fine if they do it, it's just not for me.
I do that too.
It could work both ways. They can, why can't I? Right?
Yeah, there's room in the universe for a lot of people with a lot of birth to give a lot of people space. And if you give other people space but you never give yourself any, why is that? There's a disconnect there.
It's because I'm responsible for the things that I do, and I'm not responsible for other people. You know, they're responsible for themselves. That's the disconnect. But, you know, then we go again get into that whole enforcement problem.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
No, but then you're back to what they're doing. Would it be okay if everyone else were doing it? Probably not.
I think this would be really helpful for like if there was an FI person in the room, because you know, this is sort of a thing where, you know, everybody's just because everybody's doing something doesn't mean that it's right. It just means that they're doing it, right? And then the one FI person be like, no, that's wrong. I'm not going to do it. And you know, being FE as inferior as FE is in INTPs, if I see other people do it, I'm probably going to assume, okay, we could do that, okay, and I'll just build that into my system and do it. I never think twice about, you know, is this right or wrong? Should I do it or should I not do it? I don't think about it like that. If I see somebody do it, I'm like, okay, it works, it's possible. Those are the results I can expect from that. I'm going to calculate it into it and just go with it. It's not until like somebody who has FI comes into the picture and be like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, well, because I saw somebody else do it. They're like, no, that's bad. Don't do that. I mean, how could you do this? Think of all the people you're hurting, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Well, you upset? And they're like, yes, I'm upset. And so then I'm like, okay, so this is bad. And then I cross it out. And so, like, you know, it's easy for us to be like, yeah, theoretically, you know, there's a disconnect and all this. But in reality, most of the time, INTPs will probably just go along with it because there's a desire in us to be accepted by the group. And sometimes that means mimicking what other people are doing, regardless of whether we question the morality of it. So that actually makes me wonder, what do you guys do when, you know, let's say that you have certain moral, ethical codes that you've been taught growing up, and then you see other people violating those rules. What do you do? What have you done?
What would be such a thing? Could you give an example?
Okay, let's say that we've been taught that stealing is wrong, right? I think this is actually pretty fairly common. So, you know, stealing is wrong, but then you see other people, you know, walking around the grocery store, like picking up like pieces of grapes and trying it and tasting it, and then moving along and not having purchased it. Technically, that's stealing, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people do it. In fact, a ton of people are doing it. This is the custom. What do you do? How do you feel about that?
I would be a little annoyed, but I wouldn't do anything.
Same.
I've never seen it because I live in Asia. Like most people here are very much society abiding. It's a very SJ culture. Most of us are very non-confrontational, even if it will happen. But like, I really don't know how to react if I saw it in front of me, and until, you know, I can see it, and then I'll have a reaction. So yeah.
I think that I'd probably play out the ramifications of the social integrity of the situation. Is that something that can happen that society can support? Are there any victims to that situation? At what cost is that going on, and is everyone in on it? And I think if it's really honest and very open and very understood culturally, then it's just part of the cultural patterns. And to understand that is to make a cultural shift in understanding what culture you're in. Because different cultures have different rules about right and wrong. So to understand the cultural rules of one place, that's okay and everyone accepts it, and other people are not hurt by it, and it's all part of the paradigm, is to step into and accept that culture for a while, and to be part of that culture. And then to go back to another culture where that is wrong. You just have to be able to be aware of what the cultural rules are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very good point. Like when you say, is everyone in on it? Because like it's not my job to like police other people. So if I saw someone doing it, I'd be like, whatever they think, you know, like I don't agree with it. A lot of people wouldn't agree with it, but if I were to argue with them, they would probably have that position where it's like nobody cares. But if it was someone I knew or someone personal to me and I'm with them and I see them doing that and I'm like, that's not cool by me, like I'm gonna let you know.
Yeah, if it was somebody I know, like I would definitely call them out. But if it's like a stranger, like you don't know the situation, you don't know the person, like are they dangerous even? Like are you putting yourself in a tricky situation for calling them out and embarrassing them in public? Like how would they react? I would always think about those things. Like would I endanger myself or like other people just to be able to have a satisfying call out in public? I don't like confrontations that much.
And how did they understand it? That's the other thing is that if they understand it better than you do, the situation, then you're outside of the understanding. They understand their own behaviors and their motivations in a better way than you do. You'd actually have to sit down and have a discussion where you're drawing all that out of them, trying to get their motives and how many other people are in agreement with them. It just seems like a lot of assumption to say that's not right for you to do.
Are you talking about the people that you know?
Even people I know. I mean, the crossing rules, especially the rules that aren't specifically laid out. Like someone I know who maybe is of a religion that's not mine. I don't know what their context of morality is. I don't understand what rules they abide by in their life. And whether they're, betraying themselves or not, that would be their business.
Yeah, like I also think about other people's moral compasses because mine is not very well attuned to what I want. I mostly just follow ethics. That's why I'm really interested in like moral theories. But I also understand that that's just what it is. It's a theory. Whether I apply it to myself or I try to apply it to other people, like that's a whole different playing field already. So yeah,
the world is a lot trickier.
Definitely. There's a lot of more nuance with being human.
It's interesting now that like the conversation topic right now is very like INP. Like whenever I get together with my INP friends, they end up going into like any tangents, which are like mini thought experiments. So if this, like, would you this, or like all of these possibilities. So it's like, this is how it looks like when NE starts taking up the room. It'll just turn into these types of conversations.
Kind of like racquetball and the ball is going all over the place.
Yeah.
Just keep hitting it if it comes at you.
Yeah. Oh, but how about this? Okay, more what if.
Right.
Like here's like a lot of obvious like culture avoidance, don't want to cause problems. But what if you're so sure, you're right? I don't know about you guys, but I will make things awkward, and I know I make it awkward if I know I'm right. Like you're certain I'm right about something.
I've done that a couple of times, actually. Yeah. Like there was this one time, maybe 2 years ago, I was on a boat, and there was a sign that literally says, "Don't throw your garbage into the ocean." And I saw somebody do that. So I just yelled at them like, "Hey, can't you read?" And I made sure that my voice was the loudest in the deck, and everybody was just like staring at them. And like deep down inside, I was like, "Yeah, that's what you get."
It's like, this is awkward, but you'll be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, if I know I'm right, there's no awkwardness. I know I'm right.
Yeah.
Awkwardness comes way after when I've seen the expression on the other person's face and everybody else around me who are like, "Oh my God, did you just do that?" That's when I'm like, okay, my bad.
Yeah. Super INTP.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When I was younger, I used to say things. But then now that I've had enough of those run-ins with awkwardness of the other person's facial reaction, there's a moment where I stop myself before I say the thing that I'm really sure about. And I'm like, how do I deliver this?
Yeah.
How do I deliver this for best effect on them, on the situation? What's the best delivery? That's a whole nother question than this is just the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a situation like
But then you have like the moment leaves you. You don't always have that option. Like think of all the times like you want to say something and you don't, and the moment leaves and you're not saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree that you should try to think things through, but that's not always an option. And most of the time, the moment is gone.
Yeah.
From it.
Yeah.
It probably
Maybe, like-
depends on if I'm seeing that person again.
Yeah. IPs, like something like that is a secondary consideration is how like the collective will take it until like you see them react and you're like, oh, that's how the collective takes it. Ah, I see.
That's going in the memory bank for sure.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is that like the goal is never to like embarrass somebody, obviously. If you see them doing wrong, it's not like to shame them, it's to change their actions in the future.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's more
how
of a-
did we get to this topic? That's the question I wonder with every time I talk to an any user, like, how did we get to this? What led to this?
It started with strangers eating grapes at the grocery store. That's how it started.
Yeah.
Yes, and that stemmed from moral philosophy, which was threaded all the way back to Descartes, I think, is when I brought him up at the beginning.
And Kant.
And Kant, yes, because you asked about Kant in response to Descartes. There you go.
Wow, that's lovely. See, any can be traced back by any users very well. So I'm wondering about you guys, your relationship with your emos, your feelings, your emotions. You were talking about it a little bit beforehand too. I was wondering like how you would describe your emotions.
I always think of them as just like my brain's chemical responses to a situation. I will feel them only afterwards, after so much rumination and self-reflecting. Like I'll take them home with me, but I won't feel them in the moment. Like it's like picking interesting things while you're going on walks, and then you know that they're in your pocket, but you only look at them when you get home. Yeah.
I think it depends. Let's say there's a discussion, and I'm being told you're angry. No, I'm not angry. I say angrily, not even aware that I'm angry, and then I stop and like, yeah, maybe I'm a little angry, something like that. Or I have like a really short fuse and I get angry, and then like, oh, I have no reason to be angry, and then I'm done with it, and then I'm done. And to some people, that's weird.
Yeah, I was thinking like I almost don't feel something if I can't justify it. Like if I was angry, for instance, and I had no cause to be angry, I'd literally be like, there's no reason to be angry. I'm not angry. Just like plain and simple. Like there's something else going on if I feel angry.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if like thinkers need to like justify their emotions to like, yeah, because or else like they're at risk for compartmentalizing them, like what you guys were talking about.
Maybe not just justify, but like understand.
Understand. Yeah.
Get to the bottom of. They're for me, they're like biofeedback, sort of like when you feel sick and you're wondering what you ate. You know, or if you've got a sore muscle or a bruise and you wonder where it came from. That's my relationship with emotions. I'm like, okay, it's here and it's uncomfortable. What triggered it? What's going on? Where's the source of that? How do I resolve it? There's this whole little logic train that needs to go through and sort it and parse it out and name all the pieces in order for me to wrap my head around it. But until then, it's just I don't feel well.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes I have this thing like there is a lingering something, and I have to really think to figure out where that comes from. Like it's just in the back of my head for a long time, and I really have to go back to figure out what's going on.
That's fascinating. How about you, Audrey?
So when I was younger, before I finally kind of decided I was INTP and worked on myself, before then it was like everybody said here, you know, it was compartmentalized. It was people telling me you have anger issues, and you know, like I was a head of a Model UN conference one time, and I thought I was fine, but they were like, okay, you have anger issues, and I was just like, no, I don't. But maybe I would have less of it if you guys actually paid attention and did your jobs. But anyway, But now that I know, and then now that I know that I have these issues, I've worked through them, and I realized that it's really difficult for me to be feeling emotions in the moment, number one. And number two, even if I were to try to trace back to at what time I may have felt anger or sadness or whatever emotion, it's likely incorrect because I cannot trust my memory, which is not, it's simply selective. As impression, I think I have that impression, but it may not be the truth. So, I have sort of resorted to accepting that I have this emotion. I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know what the solution is. I'm just gonna sit on the emotion for a while, and then it'll go away maybe. And it's worked out okay so far. It's to believe, it's to accept that maybe not all emotions have a root in something, unless it's that time of the month where you definitely have a reason for why you're feeling emotions.
I just got that.
That's the best reason of all, because you can have the solid data to back it up.
Exactly.
You're like, in 4 days, I'll be fine again. Leave me alone.
Yeah, and that's the only time where I can be sure that there is certain root based upon which I'm experiencing these emotions. But other times, I just, I've accepted, I'm accepting something somewhere, and I've done this thing called where you create something called emotional bubble. I don't know if you guys heard of that concept, where you sort of teach yourself to detach yourself by creating a mental bubble around the space you're in. And therefore, you protect yourself from these invasive emotions from other people. And I've worked on that for a while, and it's worked out okay.
So emotional bubble is a positive concept, like, of self-care, or is it like a negative concept of like keeping emotions out?
It is
Sorry.
both. It is both.
Is it out of self-preservation?
I would say both self-preservation and for control. It's to allow myself to have a safe space to feel my emotions, whatever they may be, but also to prevent myself from being influenced by emotions other people may be feeling. And giving myself a clear head, because once emotions come into my head, whether it's positive, happy emotions or negative emotions, it's going to screw up with like what I'm thinking in the moment. And I can't think properly. So by creating a sort of a mental space away from all that, I can sort of be a little more objective and be clear in what I'm observing, while allowing myself to have that calm space where I can do that thinking.
I see. So it's to give you like, so I hear that like thinkers, like something that can be difficult is like feeling control over your emotions at times. So maybe with the emotional bubble, like it gives you a sense of control over that particular process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And so what is the latest NE tangent you have gone on in your life? Like whether it's like researching something really niche, talking to someone about a really thought experiment-y topic, like just now.
I was thinking 5 minutes ago on this call. It was really fun.
I'll tell you something that I got to do it like in the moment. That's completely is sort of based off on SE actually. So right now I'm surrounded by STPs and NFJs. They're like in my life right now. I don't know why, but like every person I meet are like ESTPs, ISTPs, ENFJs, and INFJs for whatever reason. And so I'm getting this like huge dose of extroverted sensing data that they're collecting and just blasting out to me. I don't know, at each other. And one time we were talking about tree houses. My ENFJ friend wanted to go visit a tree house, and she was looking at it. And now they have really fancy tree houses. They're like tree mansions at this point. And you like they're hotels, or they have like 5 rooms. They have like showers. I mean, these are adult tree houses. You could have parties and everything. And my ISTP friend, he showed us a picture of this tree that was so big. It was in the Amazon, and he was like this thick, and this tree was this big, just width-wise. And so we were just talking about that, and suddenly a thought came to me about how, from our initial point in history when we were just getting out of trees and starting to walk on 2 feet, and I just kind of casually threw this out at my friends, and I thought, and I said, do you think that we did all of this technological advancement just to get a better tree house system? So that we can live in trees as a hotel instead of, say, the tree crap that our ancestors might have lived on, just trees. And they looked at me like, you guys are looking at me right now, like, what are you talking about? But so I thought it was kind of interesting because I would have never thought about that had they not been talking about trees, had they not been talking about going to tree houses, or showing all these tree data for whatever reason that they were doing at the moment. And so I could sort of pick on how like I was using the data they're providing, this massive extroverted sensing, and I was taking whatever I thought was important through my introverted sensing, and then I was creating this holistic theory in which I threw at them using extroverted intuition, and their introverted intuition thinking introverted intuition basically looking at me like, what are you talking about? And so I got to see that process sort of happen in real life and in real time, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And I don't know why I started talking about this now. Sorry.
It's your NE rabbit hole. I like to call it that.
Yeah. Your any ideas about tree houses and how they're going to take over hotels?
Or like the whole point of mankind developing all this technology, houses and water systems, piping and internet, it was just to have a better life in trees again,
Those are on comes down. Back into the tree. That's the next stage.
Yeah.
It's like, we have the internet in our pocket, and what do we use it for? Most of the time, nothing sensible. So.
I recently read this really good book called How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she talks about that she always assumed that emotions were like specific areas of the brain that they would fire. But she came to understand through a series of studies that they're actually constructs and that they're dependent upon language. So if you don't have a word for a certain kind of emotion, then you can't experience that emotion because there's a contextual understanding of the emotion that has to happen before it exists.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That was my latest, just like, and understanding that and understanding how all of reality is a series of constructs. Everything we understand is like a table is only a table because we understand what a table is in a grouping of tables. Like a table can have a lot of legs and generally has a flat surface. What if the surface is slanted? Or what if it has 3 legs? Or what if it's made out of ice? All these different ways but you can still sort of see that it's a table because table is an idea, not a thing. So the actual thing of the table doesn't exist as a table. It's just a collection of molecules. And the same way with emotions, that those neurons can fire, but we don't understand it as anger or as sadness until we have the word for anger or sadness to say that is the pattern of anger, that is the pattern of sadness, and there's a conscious recognition of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sorry.
This might be any, but like, do you like assign meanings to words that don't have those meanings?
Do I make up my own definitions for things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do sometimes, and sometimes I find out I have made definitions inadvertently that are not tracking with everyone else's definitions. Like I used to think that capitulate meant something very similar to catapulting, but it's not, is to lie. So there's been some corrective moments in my vocabulary. I'm like, well, I thought this word meant that, and I just going around using it in this certain context, but no, that's not really what it meant at all. So that's what it meant to me personally. So it was useful to me personally, but as soon as I started interacting with someone else, there was a lot of confusion.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like the NE shortcutting. It's like, okay, the sensory I can just lump in. It kind of sounds like catapulting. I'm going to assume that it means catapulting, so I'm going to make that intuitive connection and by accident forget about the sensory.
Yeah, the exactness is lost sometimes.
But that thing you said about your brain firing and attachment to a word, that's kind of like trigger words, how some words are emotionally triggering to some people, and everyone does that to some extent, that they have connotations to words being conventionally triggering or not. Like we still have experiential attachment to things.
Yeah, and that emotional context being tied to that random syllables that come out of someone else's mouth is something that we've constructed. So no one else really ever hurts our feelings or offends us. We set ourselves up to be offended in certain ways, and then other people just set off that mousetrap.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah. So it's like that concept that everything stems from you that Jung talks about. Like your reactions to the outer world is really something that is within you, and that
Your responsibility.
Yeah.
You're an NLP person, right, Joyce?
Yeah, I'm an NLP person.
You're an NLP person. I don't know a lot about NLP, but I do know like one of the basic concepts is understanding that our perception of reality is different than actual reality. And our perception is a construct that we make from the 10 bits of information we have, and we have to draw these constellations between them. But really, that's such a small portion of all the information available. It doesn't even begin to touch what is really happening. So when we see someone who has a completely different idea of what's real and what's going on, it's not that they're wrong. It's that they just have different access to different pieces of reality. And they're making different conclusions.
Yeah, that's completely true. In NLP, they talk about how your traumatic response to things and how it affects your self-esteem and your self-image is actually more important than the traumatic experience itself, because someone else can go through the same traumatic experience but take it differently. So someone who's able to retain their self-concept while going through something that you've gone through, they can recover from it more quickly. But if your self-concept and your self-esteem is hit because of that event and how you internalized it, then you won't be able to recover from the event. So a lot of, like, a majority of the processing, or maybe even all of it, comes from your own psyche. And like NLP is all about reinterpreting your inner thought life, so you have different results in your life.
I kind of think that's one of the superpowers of INTPs, is the ability to reinterpret. Because of the NE, that reinterpretation, it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be this other thing, or you could look at it like this, or you could look at it like that. Or if we get a little bit more information, we could look at it a completely different way. And so we get to pick and choose the healthiest interpretation.
Yeah, that's why I always hold off on feeling. That's like, I need to understand this concept right here, right now, as it's presented to me. And anything that is related to my feeling will taint that data. So that's why I'd rather not experience it right now, because what if I don't understand it as accurately as possible? And actually, I kind of want to backtrack on Heather. Like, the concept of the language and the understanding is so fascinating to me, because I speak 4 languages and three what do you call this? Hogan. Dialects.
Yeah.
So 4 languages and 3 dialects. And like sometimes my concept of just one English word is so fractured because it has so many different translations. So I'd rather not attach anything to the word, especially when I'm speaking it or using it.
Yeah, there's a slippery slope where the more words we throw into something, the more misunderstanding we have, because the language is sloppy around its description. And I can understand wanting to be very precise with the words you choose in order to get very precise about the meaning you intended to convey.
I read an article about that a long time ago. When you're talking to a person, you're more likely to talk to the real person if you're speaking their native language, because of experiential connotation and attachment to words. So if someone is not speaking in their native language, they are operating in a mode where they don't have those attachments to the words they're using.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I love this conversation, and Heather, you're so right about NE's strength being reinterpreting things. NE is really good at like reimagining things. It's like a superpower. And so my question for you guys is, what are your superpowers? Like, what is the INTP superpower, or what is your specific superpower as a person on the earth?
Do you guys hear chicken clucking?
A rooster. It's a rooster.
Wow.
Oh, right, rooster. Okay.
That might be my neighbors. I'm sorry. It's early in the morning.
All right.
Japan is a very interesting place.
I'm in the outskirts.
It's an actual rooster, so. Like,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was like, all right.
I thought it was like a mechanical rooster.
Me
No,
too. I was like, why
I
isn't
don't
somebody
live
turning
in the
that thing
city
off?
proper.
Like, I was really hoping for somebody to turn that off, but I don't think that's possible now.
I'm sorry, I'll just mute my mic.
Oh no! It's pleasant now that I know it's real.
Before it
Why
was
is
kind
it
of like
different
a hallucination of a.
I'm imagining that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the only thing you can really be sure is existing is yourself. And outside of that, whether the rooster is real or not, that's the big question.
Are you
Maybe
playing
I've just been like,
Schrodinger's cat? You don't know if it's a cat or not unless you open the box, and you can never open the box, so you never know if the cat is real or dead or alive.
No, but even if you know yourself are real, then which frame of concept of self do you have today versus 2 months from now?
Right.
And is that even real?
So
sometimes
true.
I like to play this game with my friends. Like, we call it Schrodinger's jerk. Like, am I a bad person right now because of the context of the situation, or like, is it all in my head because I think of that?
You'll never know.
Yeah, nobody has the answer.
I love how I asked you guys about strengths, and now we're
Oh,
talking about
Joyce had a
Schrodinger's
point.
cat.
I'm trying to make a point.
Any
I'm
superpower.
Superpower.
That was a demonstration.
Tangents. We have the superpower of tangents. If we want to distract off of the main point, we can at any point. Not a problem.
Yeah, I guess like idea generation. For me, when I was younger, I really had very bad social anxiety. And so as I was learning the archetypes, I made an ENTP persona for myself when I present myself to the public, because I used to go to gigs. I was a drummer, and being the only girl drummer in the area, a lot of people would like to talk to you. So I made that persona just so that I could cope with the situation, but it's not me. It's just like calculated responses.
Well, I've got another one because I was thinking about Sartre and Descartes earlier, and Sartre's complaints about Descartes. Sartre suffered from the idea that hell is other people, and he really struggled with constant awareness of other people perceiving him. And I think that one of my superpowers is that I can turn that off, or that I fail to turn it on. So Sartre was always feeling he was obliged to be aware of other people watching him. I'm oblivious to that most of the time, and I think sometimes that can play in your favor.
Yes, and what you just said there, like there has been a lot of talk about the emotional bubble and the control and putting feelings aside, but all of that assumes a real-time understanding of the emotional that I can't say I have. Like
So-
you try, you have all these techniques, but still you're gonna be that person like, I'm not angry, or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so it was never really like there to begin with. So you don't really like make a conscious effort to compartmentalize because it was never conscious to begin with, or like it was never at the forefront.
It's like if you're aware, you can try, but you're not always gonna have that awareness, I think.
Yeah.
To be able to just be in a resting state where you're oblivious to other people, I think is a strength sometimes, because then peer pressure doesn't apply. And other people's opinions, you don't care what they think because you're not really aware of it. So you just tend to do things independently by your own standards, which you get to set. So you're sort of empowered to do your own thing without feeling pressure from other people.
I love that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, just total objectivity. Like, you can remove yourself from a situation, like examine it. It's super useful when talking about philosophy, because it's like, well, what I would do isn't necessarily the train of thought I have to go down to think this philosophy, and to be able to understand it, like, I'd have to remove myself from that.
Yeah.
Or like totally objective to me, it makes sense to me, but how objective it actually is, I don't know.
Right. It's still involving my framework and my matrix of logic. So it doesn't involve me as an as an ego, but it does involve me as a matrix, which is still, in another way. It's removed, but at the same time, it's still very centric.
Yeah, it's what you go on.
Yeah,
Definitely, but also like recognition of that and being able to put it to the side just for like even momentarily to be able to examine something from another point of view.
That's so
Yeah.
easily said sometimes.
Various matrices. What's your logic? What's my logic? What's their logic?
Yeah.
Be able to compare and contrast those.
Wow, that's a really good point about like the obliviousness. So it's something that is a superpower because it allows you to focus on your thought process when you're not overly concerned about like the collective in the first place. It allows you to have a certain type of self-awareness from that. I don't know how to explain that. How about you, Audrey?
So for me, it's actually helped me the opposite. So if before I thought I could remove myself from situations and see things objectively, now I'm using it to place myself within the proper context to see how this might have played out differently had I said this or that, or why this person reacted this way when I said this, or before if I used it to say, well, these are all the possibilities. Now I'm using it to say, yeah, but let's look at the probabilities and see which one's the best. It's just and see what's best for the group, as opposed to before, which it really didn't matter because they all had equal weight. I was looking at it from an objective perspective, so technically they all have equal chance of manifesting. But now, by placing myself within the context, by placing others within this context, and putting them into the focal point, I can start to see how some things have better probabilities than others, and using that to do what I think I should do to benefit the group, and also not die and be completely useless to society, if that makes sense.
it does.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Also, one of the ways to spot an INTP, only a certain subtype of INTP, is they'll use the word like probability. Like some of them, like a certain small subsection, like Audrey, I noticed it with some other like TI DOMs too, is that they'll say the probability of this, and then the probability of this, and then they're weighting like the probabilities in their head. Not all do that, but when they do that, they tend to be like thinkers. Just a observation, could be wrong right now, that seems to hold.
That thing you said there, I don't do that all the time, but if I'm doing that, that's a response of my perception of the person I'm talking to. Like, if I perceive the person I'm talking to be quite literal in their interpretation of things, I'll do that disclaimer way more than I would with someone I wouldn't expect to need to say that to, if that makes any sense. With certain people, I would use disclaimers as likely, probably, that kind of thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily a flavor of INTP, but I think it could be in certain interactions we would be more prone to do that kind of thing based on how we perceive the person we're talking to.
Yeah, interesting.
I think a lot of it has to do with prediction power and confidence in prediction. I mean, if someone wants me to predict something, I say, well, this is more likely than that to happen. This has a higher chance of happening. So we should just, if we're betting people, then let's bet on that. But I don't really tend to be future thinking so much. I tend to be alternate present thinking, or past on top of present. There's not a lot of predictions that happen. I'm not trying to tell what's going to happen in a year or whether this thing is going to work out. It's more like well, let's just do it and find out. I'm really curious, and it seems like it would be our best chance, so let's just go for it. But my confidence in that prediction is only as high as the probability is really 99%.
That's really fantastic. The word you used, Heather, alternate present. That is the perfect way to put the timeline of NE. It's like an alternate version of the present. And I'm like, wow, I'm sorry, I'm just like, wow, over your word choice.
I think it's because I've been practicing my FE due to my work. So I try not to give people like my probability predictions unless they ask it of me, because not a lot of people like it when I do predictions for them. It's especially since I think I was raised in a very FE community. So they don't appreciate when somebody might be right, but like at present time, do they need it from you? So I tend to stray away from the verbiage, because it can be, I don't think it's hurtful, but like it can strike a chord with someone at the given moment. So I try to be mindful of that too.
That they want more emotiveness from you than they do information and facts.
In a way, yeah. So I only use that kind of verbiage when I'm talking to somebody specifically asking me like, oh, what are your predictions about this? Or like, what could possibly happen? What are the probabilities of this, and that happen? And that's the only time I feel free to speak about it. So I have calculated responses to everything, because how can I say? I've been told that I sound robotic a lot. That's why.
I get told I sound sciencey.
What do you guys get told? The rest of you, what you sound like?
Nobody ever says that to me.
That I look tired. Seem tired or bored.
I got recently someone that said that they didn't think I had a sense of humor.
Who are the people you guys hang out with, dude?
What kind of people do you guys hang out with?
They were trying to be nice, and they were like, "But you proved me wrong," and I was like, "All right."
Oh wow.
First impressions, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've been practicing. Like, I have like little books that I've been collecting ever since that little girl told me she'd like to kill me when I was in elementary school, and I realized it probably has to do with the way I appear to people. I've been actively engaged in presenting a better front, so that they don't want to kill me at the first time we meet. So now I think, when I usually meet people, they're like, "You're such a pleasant individual," and I'm like, "Thank you. I worked on that for like 20 years."
Well, I don't want to kill you, so I think you're doing really well.
Appreciate that.
Way back when I was in college, I remember like one of the last weeks in college, several girls in my class told me that when they first met me, they thought I was scary.
I get intimidating.
Yeah, because I was quiet and had different interests to them, and that was it, I think.
My nickname in high school is Snake Kid, because
Did you like snakes?
No, because they thought I was like a reptilian in human skin.
They thought you were cold-blooded? Oh my.
Yeah. I get that a lot. And then when I got my type, and then I've only typed as INTP. Like, I've never gotten any other result. So that has reinforced onto me that, yeah, maybe this is the only type I've ever been. So as I was like studying it, I only read weaknesses. And then every year I'll evaluate myself, like, is this weakness still present in me?
That's the best way to use type.
So I tried to cope with it.
Yeah, that's what type should be used as. Carl Jung, in his original books, what he wrote about was that he didn't make the 16 types like INFJ and that type of thing, because he was afraid that people would self-identify too much with their type. So it is a real thing. Like, Carl Jung did believe that it was a real thing, but he didn't want to give it like a label, like, because he was afraid that people they like labels. So when they get their label back, they'll be like, I love it, I want to be this forever. But what Carl Jung wrote about, he's like, you have to learn how to do the things that are not your natural strengths. Like, once you learn what your natural strengths are, you have to integrate the areas that are weaker. And so, I don't know, that's exactly what Carl Jung wanted people to do. It's like, work on their weaknesses. So that's great. Good job.
I think that's what his purpose was, really, from the get-go, is like to give people like a starting point. Like, this is what you are right now, but you can also be something else, something better. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My INFP friend puts type like this. It's like an exoskeleton, and you get to fill the inside of that. So it's kind of like it's a starting point, like what you said, but the growth you have individually is like up to you, and it's
Yeah,
I don't know.
you're responsible for that.
I think I
Yeah.
still prefer an endoskeleton. Exoskeletal things on planet Earth simply not very attractive.
Skin is kind of an exoskeleton. It keeps your insides in.
Yeah,
As long as it keeps the inside in, I don't care.
But you can't. Every time you need to grow, you have to like molt and get rid of your old skin, and then you're vulnerable for like however long it takes to harden. It's just too much hassle.
Well, I think that maybe some people use type in an exoskeleton kind of way where they would have to molt, where they're like, well, that doesn't apply to me anymore, and then they have to leave it behind, and then they're all jelly and don't have an identity for a while.
Do you guys think people can change types?
What?
Yeah.
Is this? Are you
making a statement or
joke?
a question?
It's gonna be like a controversial topic.
Wait. Are you serious? Like, who believes that people can change type like entirely?
Not entirely. Maybe like they'll keep their dominant function, but there will be a shift due to trauma in like the lower stacks. I think it's really difficult to change dominant functions.
For me, there are like two schools of thought I see that are very valid in this. It's like there's some people who say you can't change your type, right? And so that when people perceive a change in type, sometimes they mistype themselves to begin with, and that's a possibility. Another school of thought is that your personality type is trends over time, and so you're born with an innate genetic preference, like your right hand. But some people, they learn how to write with their left hand, and they become like, or the other way around normally, but they become proficient with the hand that they're not born with. And so there's two school of thoughts, and I guess there's not enough research done to know which is the case. I do think that there's some genetic property to type, but I wonder how much you can like rewire your brain and if that's possible. But most people who say that they change types were normally, in my experience, mistyped in the beginning too. I feel bad saying controversial opinions. I wonder if like in an extremely traumatized person case, it might be possible. So there's a psychological case where this guy gets a pipe through his head, right? And part of his brain is gone.
That's different. That's like,
yeah. And then his personality changed. So I'm wondering if someone
have been blown out.
Well, trauma's like one end of the spectrum, but like the opposite end would be like enlightenment, right? Like using MBTI as a tool to improve yourself. What if you wanted to change yourself?
You could become like the most like grown version of an INTP though, that you incorporate all of the growth areas. Would that still be like you completely changed a type, or could you be like the 2.0 of that type?
I tend to think that the whole universe of all of humanity is within you, and that certain pieces of that manifest first, and so you overcome the learning curve to those first, and so they can be kind of your home base. Or that the dynamics between you and your parents set you early in childhood to be a certain way, one of the two. And then from there, you explore your options, and usually completing those is finding the complement to that, which is the shadow functions that you're dealing with. But it eventually would hopefully span out into knowing all of them. So a really growth mindset sort of person would have at least some sort of foothold in all the functions.
Yes, I agree. But it depends on like how you see what your type is. Like I see your type is your starting point. So how could you change starting points if it's already happened? So I see like you could be like an INTP who's grown all the functions, let's say hypothetically, but you're still an INTP because your initial starting point was that. But you can become such a different version than the stereotype that people wouldn't consider you an INTP anymore.
I think the reason like I'm having like a different path of thinking is because when I think of being an INTP, it's not like a single starting point. I can look back at like my childhood, for instance, and I could see all these points where I made the decision to act this way. And then that became a pattern.
If you have free will, but maybe you just thought you decided and it was decided for you by your brain.
It's true.
Even if you increase your awareness and develop with experience, you still carry yourself with you. Like
it's
you
like what
can
we were talking before, like how you can see like different things from the same thing from different perspectives.
Of course, but you're still you.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So
But like
that's
Also, we
moving
have
forward,
crappy
could you
memory.
choose like to have the same moments and choose a different reaction?
no, but that agent in you that drove you to make a different choice, that's still you. You don't get rid of that and change types because it was, if you perceive that to be type, that's still you. You didn't change type. You just opted differently.
Yeah, could you take away your TI and not have it anymore? Could you unravel that totally and have it not exist and be something else at this point if you wanted to?
If you got the pipe through your head, I guess.
Yeah, if it blows out the TI portion of your brain, you don't have it anymore.
May I interject?
Yeah.
My aunt, she is a child psychologist. When I was younger, she used to check me and my brothers if we exhibited any sociopathic tendencies.
Ooh.
Yeah. And something that she told me really sticks with me right now is that the human brain is only as malleable as the personality you have. It's because some people are not as strong to trauma points. So when their reaction to trauma isn't as healthy, like they have serotonin deficiency or dopamine deficiency, and if that happens for like very, very long periods of time, your brain rewires itself. So it will develop like a different kind of preference. So maybe when that happens, your dominant function may stay the same, or it will be another version of itself due to the adapting points. But if you have any questions, if I displayed any sociopathic tendencies, I did.
No. But what you said there about it becoming a different version of itself, that makes perfect sense. But it's a different version of itself. It didn't change.
Yes. It's still itself, but the adaptation, the way that it will present itself to the tribe, like how you would talk, maybe you would change your verbiage, maybe you would change how you approach points of views, but that is only due to your adaptation style as of now.
Yes.
Do you guys think that INTPs as a group have maybe a similar chemistry makeup of a certain amount of serotonin versus other types and a certain amount of dopamine versus other types?
Maybe.
I'm thinking it just seems like the oxytocin would be lower, or at least not connected to the prefrontal cortex in the same way that it is with extroverted feelers.
I've asked her about that. Like I think I asked her before. Like I think my reward system is broken.
Oh, I was just about to say. I say we have this. I think we have the same capabilities, but we get rewarded differently. So that you said reward system is broken. That was an interesting, similar thought right there.
Yeah. I think it's because how I deal with my emotions is I have a catharsis net. Like I'll catch them all, and then I'll try to experience them at once through an activity. Like I like to, one of my hobbies is cathartic crying. So what I'll do is like, I'll find a piece of media that I know for sure will get tears out of me, and then I'll just let it happen. And for the rest of the week, I'm good.
I did that for a while too, yeah. Certain series, Call the Midwife always did it for me. That was a good one. Very effective. I'd watch it about every 3 days when I felt the buildup of the tension. I'm like, okay, gotta have a cry now. You just get born with some sappy music. Check. I think that crying engages the parasympathetic nervous system. And so when you're trying to release a lot of anxiety, then crying can bring your anxiety down.
It releases a lot of those stress hormones that you've been keeping up. Yeah, so like I like to do that. It's very systematic. Systematic crying.
I realized that why you get called scientific, because they're parasympathetic, all the brain region science knowledge. It makes a lot of sense, but it's cool. I love learning about that. And so what are INTP weaknesses, or what are your weaknesses as a person?
Oh boy.
Getting labeled by others. in a way that I wasn't aware of myself. That whole Bernie Sanders thing that I was talking about earlier. Also, Jake Gyllenhaal that had the same sort of reaction when they're interviewing him. Someone saying, everyone thinks you're such and such. And then they move on. Like, that's just something I can process. I have to like imagine how other people are seeing me all of a sudden all at once when I've been neglecting that. It's overwhelming. And I'm just like, can I have like 20 minutes to soak that in and process that and see if I even agree with that? I don't even know. I can't even, I can't think it through.
Yeah, that's not going to happen in that second. It's not.
Right. So I have this deer in the headlights look, and then they can move on, and I'm like, and I can't have a normal conversation for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, or if you happen to say something, you'll think about it later and be like, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I thought in the moment that was the thing, but I guess it wasn't the thing because that shit takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a weakness. An inability to process in the moment other people's comments about my character and how I come across.
I think I would have to say the same. Because English isn't my first language, I'm very sensitive about it. So like when somebody says like, is this what you meant? This and that, and then there are none of the things that I said, I like to backtrack onto it, and then I just like TIFE for like the whole afternoon, like what did I say? What did I say? Or like when somebody says, oh, you appear to be like this, and that is not the essence of what I was trying to convey. I don't like accuracy, especially in myself. So if they give me a description about myself that I really do not agree with, I will sit with it. And I don't know when it ends, and that frustrates me.
Yeah, I think another weakness is like taking positions in arguments that I don't agree with, and that kind of leads to what you were talking about. Like before, when I brought up like changing types, like I don't feel strongly either way. I don't know enough to like say, but I'll take the position of like that everyone disagrees with just for the sake of having the conversation, and then everyone will think, well, that's my position, even if it's not. So just like weakness is definitely like being clear on who I am, so that comes across versus just like what I happen to be thinking at the moment.
Yeah, the devil's advocate comes up, and I'm just like, well, we just need to have a conversation, and someone's got to take this other side. And so I do, but I don't really think, is that what I'm going to stand on for the next 5 years? There's not a long-term commitment to that stand.
Yeah. My friend Heidi Parib, she calls it like any users, they visit hills. So people, when they normally talk about opinion, it's because they'll die on that hill. But NE is like they're visiting that hill to see if like what they believe it as they're talking. But it's not like a firm commitment if they're fighting for it. It's just that someone has to take that side.
I like that description.
Oh, sorry. I call that worldview tourist. I'm a
worldview tourist. Wow, you're really coining the terms today, Heather.
I just like to visit other people's worldviews. I don't want to live there.
So
like, what's the view from here?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Our voices are overlapping.
Naisu.
Wow. Wow. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about inventing our own terms. And Heather, you invented so many, you told us about so many terms that you coined yourself. And I was like, that's so creative. I've never heard it said like that.
Yeah, capturing the concept with trying to pick just the right words to describe it.
Yeah. I noticed NE users are really good at finding quirky ways to represent something. So you called NE worldview tourist, you called it alternate present, you called it a few things throughout this chat, and I was like, that's so creative. And another, my ENFP friend once, she was learning about concepts, and she coined the term trauma compass, because it's like everything that you're reacting to is a trauma inside you, so it's a compass pointing towards your trauma. And I was like, so creative. Extroverted intuition is so good at dreaming up ways to put things that I'm just mind blown. Sorry, I'm voicing my how.
Okay, it's like a juxtaposition of, you have tourists and you have worldview, or you have trauma and you have compass, and you're like, it's a combination of those two, and you sort of mash them together, and then you put it in the oven.
It's really useful for helping you understand what you're trying to think about, but sometimes when you create mashups like that, or you create meaning to words and then you try to communicate that, it doesn't always come across like how it is in your head.
Right. And sometimes the vibe is off. Sometimes you're like, it's a perfect descriptor technically, but then other people are like, but I get an icky feeling about it. You're like, oh, the vibe. Oh, the FE is completely missing what I was trying to say.
That is so cool. Yeah, the NE mashup. And then sometimes it's like people, they're taken aback because there's some sort of associated meaning with those words that the NE user is like neutral to, because it's like words are these words. They're not like the associations that you're overly like FEing to it. And,
yeah,
and
we're
so
not really tied to the originals.
Yeah. Oh, another one I've gotten is that let's say I don't know the word for something, and I know a person I'm talking to knows the thing I'm trying to talk about, and I just make something up, and there's this one guy who tells me, "You really know how to simplify things to mean nothing."
Is that a compliment?
No, but I think it's kind of funny.
I think when I TINE descriptors, I try to build the system like it's like an essence capture. Like the essence of the idea, I want to capture it and like deliver it to you.
Yeah, it's like, here's the thing. You know what the thing is, right? Like, yeah, I know what the thing is, but that's not how I want it served. Or something like that.
that's so amazing. your NEs are great. And so Audrey, what are your thoughts on this?
I think my biggest weakness is skepticism. As I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everybody, I'm thinking, yeah, Heather, you really come across as somebody who has, INFP functions, And I'm just like, based on what everybody's been saying, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We're all IP types probably. And yet I'm still skeptical as to, compared to what I know to be true, are you guys really fitting that model? And I'm going to observe you guys. And I'm going to be skeptical the whole time. And I'm going to be interacting with you. I'm going to have fun. And I'm just going to listen to everybody saying what they're saying. I'm like, some things don't match. Some things don't match. I'm like, things I'm saying, like, am I matching that type? And it's happening this entire time.
But now it's like in the comments on this video, we will have like 10 INTPs like, none of these chicks are INTPs.
That's fair.
They're all ENTJs, every single one of them. They don't know.
I would not mind being an ENTJ woman, Frankly, I mean, I know a few and they're great people. So compared to me, I prefer to be an ENTJ, but unfortunately I'm not. So what you gonna do?
Well, Audrey, I've tested INFP a lot, so that whatever you're tracking with is probably the same thing those tests have. So I trust your judgment. I think it's good.
I think the way that you come up with these terms that are the reason that Joyce is reacting, because again, remember, I was thinking about John Beebe's book on the archetypes and the interaction between the core conscious and the shadow core functions, right? And so when you think about how Joyce, an NFJ, who would have NFP as shadow, is reacting to you in the way that she is, and I think that is very fascinating. And the way you use these certain concepts that everybody's talking about, and you're putting it into, say, like whatever the terms you were using, is very TE in the way that it is approached. And so I'm thinking, she seems like an INFP, and the way that Joyce constantly just catches on is, there's something going on there. There's some chemical, like chemistry going on between these two. And I'm like, the probability of her becoming an NFP is greater and greater. And that's also proof that NFPs are not stupid if you are indeed an INFP, because it has nothing to do with stupidity or smartness. She's a very intelligent woman, regardless of her type.
It's interesting. Yeah.
So it's like kind of like what we were saying before, where like we'll go with the flow, like we'll do what everyone else is doing. Because Audrey mentioned how like she has ENTJs in her life. Like I know I have like a lot of INFPs in my life, like 2 of my best friends, and I'm pretty sure my sister are INFP. So I'll tend to go with their line of thinking. So maybe that's why like it would present that way, because like I would present that way to them. I would reflect them a little bit.
The mirror neurons are kicking in way more.
Definitely, yeah.
So Naisu, a topic you really wanted to address before we close off was the culture's impact on INTP women. So I was wondering, what type of cultural backgrounds do you come from, and how has that affected your expression of INTP?
Well, I'm mixed Asian, and now I like only work for like Asian companies. So I'm always branded as the, I hate saying this, but like I always get the "you're not like other blah blah blah" stereotypes. Like I always get that, "oh, you're not like other girls," or like they like to compare me to other people, and I'm like, how does that help me in the moment of realizing who I am? If you just like compare me to something that you already perceive as negative. So when I voice that out to them, they never have a comeback, and I'm always seen as defying the status quo when it comes to, you know, Asian culture. Like you have to think of everyone. There's this saying that don't be a nail that sticks out, because if you are, the hammer will come down stronger upon you, or something like that. So I try to embody that, but sometimes it's so against my nature of being quote unquote objectively right that I'm always seen as somebody who needs to be HR'd, like, oh, you shouldn't talk this way, or you should never make the clients or any of your superiors, you know, uncomfortable. So, but in media, we're so romanticized. Like, oh, somebody is smart and quote unquote brooding. And like, I hate that. So if you like them, why do you not like me? Like there's that bitterness to it. If you're okay with them voicing out their ideas, like what's the difference of me being me, you know? So that's my qualms. Like, is it different for where you are raised? Because like for me, I had to suppress a lot of TI moments so much.
For me, I'm not an INTP, but I grew up in an Asian culture. It like in a Chinese culture, and like there's a kind of like an anti-FE type of vibe in that type of subsection of culture that I live in. It's like never express your feelings, never be open, like words of affirmation are not allowed. You cannot say that, you cannot say I love you publicly. It makes everyone
because they
awkward.
are weakness. Yeah.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, so I grew up, it was not until high school until I had like one FE friend, and it was like an ISTP, and that was like the only exposure to FE I've had in my life, because all my other family members are FI users, except my brother, but he's an ESTP who is very unexpressive. And so I have a very subdued FJ-ness. Like with other FJs, their FE is way more like obvious and you can feel it. But with me, it's more of a, like cognitively I process things like an FE user, but I feel like I've been trained to subdue myself. And so I have a more subdued energy because of the cultural upbringing. And so I'm wondering about you guys and how your cultural upbringing has affected all of you.
I'm Norwegian, lived in Norway my whole life. I think the pro of that for me is how there are no very strong traditional gender roles. That's not a thing. Like people are treated the same regardless. And I think that have given me more freedom than I would have had in other cultures. Like there's certain expectations that were never placed on me.
Well, I'm from America. New York City specifically is super like individuality focused. So there's not like that much pressure to conform to anything. Like even gender roles a little bit is like people are pretty okay with people liking whatever they want. So there's like a lot of freedom there, but then there's not a lot of framework there to operate on either. So it's kind of a little bit of a free fall sometimes, where it's like, okay, I have to make my own decisions, which I'm not that great at unless I have reason to do something.
I'm a Texan, so also America, and I grew up in mostly suburban. middle class America, pretty typical. There definitely was not a lot of intellectualism. That was a lot of the cultural stuff was much more emotional, and so I definitely got the sense that if I wanted to do anything on the thinking side, it would have to be by myself as opposed to culturally integrated, and the cultural integration was going to be emotional. So I sort of just deal with people culturally on an emotional level and then just go and do my own thing intellectually. And then it's refreshing to find people who are interested in the intellectual topics that I've zeroed in on. But I don't even really expect the culture to see me as a woman and a mother and a wife and that sort of thing to see me on an intellectual level. I mean, it comes out and then sometimes they're surprised by it, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like the sort of thing that they're looking for.
I get that. I always get that, like, that moment you could tell someone where they're like, oh, you're not what I thought. Like, you're just saying something that I didn't think would come out of your mouth whatsoever. And it's always like they're shaking a little bit and then I'm shaking a little bit because I'm like, what were you thinking of me?
What were your perceptions before I started opening my mouth? Oh boy, yeah, that always like makes me freeze up all the time.
See what you said, Heather. It reminds me of a joke I saw in a Facebook group. It's called Americans in Norway, and it was a joke for them where they said that when Corona is over, the Norwegians will be so happy that they no longer have to do the 1 meter distancing. Then they can go back to their normal 2 meter distancing. So totally on top of each other and feeling and stuff like America. That's Americans' perceptions of Norway. Like if I was gonna describe Norway as a type, it would be ISTJ.
I have Norwegian ancestors. My great-grandfather came here from Norway. And I prefer to be by myself too. I'd be glad with lots of social distancing. It hasn't bothered me at all. Everyone else is like, it's so terrible not to go out and be with other people all the time. I was like, oh yeah, so terrible.
I'll go now. Yes. I was born in South Korea, and we immigrated to the U.S. when I was about 11, 12ish. And so I got to experience very opposing types of cultures, about 180 degrees, I would say, in difference in the way everything is treated. So I remember when we were talking earlier about how, like, you have to talk to somebody in their native language because otherwise you wouldn't understand them. But I don't know if that would be true for me, because when I first arrived in the U.S., I had to start learning everything. And I felt like an infant, although conscious, I knew nothing. And so I was learning everything from the ground up, from the people around here. I in order to learn English, I had to think in English. I had to learn the definitions in English. And when I think in Korean, of course, I make Korean connections. But in English, obviously, I'm making English connections. As opposed to personality, I would say that it made me a lot more extroverted than I otherwise have been, because I had to learn a new way of life when I was 11, 12-ish. And in order to do that, I had to interact with my peers. I had to ask a lot of questions because I understood nothing. And that made me a lot more, I guess, forward in the social, in the way that I approach social situations. I also did learn Japanese on my own, watching anime.
Oh.
So when you were talking about how natsukashi or something like sentimental, I knew there was a subtle difference.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something, but we were busy talking about something else. So I wanted to go to Japan to watch a concert, and that's why I ended up studying Japanese, and then Corona happened, so that's not going to happen for a while. But in terms of cultural, I'm a firstborn, and there is always an expectation of being a daughter, being a good sister, being a good woman, whatever that means. And my ISTJ father is always keen on telling me what these things are. And as an INTP, I say, you don't know Jack, and I'll tell you why. so we have some friction, but I've sort of been able to sort of incorporate both aspects of the cultural background that I've been raised in to be who I am. And I don't really have too much trouble with that, frankly.
Yeah, can I just respond to what you said? What I meant by that is that building attachment to words, like you have that immersion, that's something different to, for example, me and Naisu. We don't live in English-speaking cultures. So we don't build those connections the same way as someone who is immersed and speak that language on an everyday basis and form those connections. So that's what I meant by that. I didn't mean that you're not a real person because...
Oh, no, I didn't understand it. I didn't misunderstand
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I've tried to learn other languages, but like it doesn't stick with me. Like I think it goes back to what you're saying. Like it just doesn't feel like I'm speaking myself. Not even like in the literal sense, obviously, but also just like there's so much of like someone's voice in the way that they speak or in the way that they write that like you can tell their personality almost, and I feel like I lose that like when I'm trying to learn another language.
I find it interesting when I speak different languages. My voice tone changes, my intonation changes. I become a different person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, some marriage counselors, like Esther Perel, what she'll do is to spice up marriages, she'll get one of the partners to speak a different language, so they embody a different persona. It kind of like re-energizes the relationship because they get to embody a new person. So I can see why you see like that it's fun. Like changing your intonation kind of makes you feel a little different as a person too. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. When I'm speaking in Japanese, I have a very INTJ-ish facade. I guess like the words I use and like how I explain things is very NI, because that's something that people can relate in the culture, I guess. Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you for that new point of view, I guess.
Yeah, I can definitely approach learning a language differently now. I think, yeah, that'd be interesting. Like trying it out like acting or something.
Yeah, it's fun.
When I speak Japanese, I'm like super feminine because all the women that I've watched like on anime and drama are super
They're
feminine.
very ENFP. They're like the heroines are very ENFP. I don't like it.
I mean, for the brief moment, I'm just like, yeah, I'm this super feminine woman that I don't relate to at all. But hey, and then as soon as I'm done, I'm back to myself. And
that's so cool. Yeah. Wow, that's an interesting chat. And so since we're bordering on a lot of, since the chat has been quite long, I think it's about time we close it. But I enjoyed talking to you all. You guys are really, really brilliant. You guys bring intellectual honesty to my life, and you guys are like so quirky with your ideas. We all go on tangents together, and like just following you guys on your tangents is really an interesting experience. I never know which rabbit hole I'll go in next with you guys. We talked about so many different things. You guys enrich my idea of variety, and I thank you for that. That was like a very interesting, like a few hours of exploring the mind of any. And yeah, you guys showed me how interesting it is to go down different thoughts. And then like I really got to talk about really interesting topics with you guys, like your mind and how everything is a construct, and we just have all of these metaphysical moments together, and they really enrich my life. So thank you for that. And I appreciate you INTPs. You guys, with your ability to spot incongruency and your ability to know when something is logically not matching up, you guys make a more intellectually honest place, and you make the world better for it. You brought in our accuracy as a society as a whole. You upgrade it, and you are eternally thanked for that. And yeah, thanks for being you, because that's amazing. Thanks for watching, everyone.
はい、こちらこそありがとうございます。Thank you.
It was so fun having y'all. So bye, y'all.
じゃあね、バイ。
Bye. Thank you for having us.